Hello, everybody. I am Jarrett Ross, the GeneaVlogger, and welcome to another GeneaVlogger live stream. Today, we're going to be in Ukraine with my Ukrainian Jewish ancestry, and we're going to be going through some of that research. So I'll be talking about what I've been doing with it. I talked a bit about it on a last week's stream, I think, but I'll talk about what I've been doing. We'll go through some of the research, look at some of the records, look at some of what's available. And maybe we'll make some small breakthroughs today. I don't expect to make any huge discoveries, but then again, with genealogy, you just never know what you might stumble upon. So maybe I will. And especially if I have anyone in the chat that understands Cyrillic really well, that'll make this really easy. I can read the names just well enough to pick them out, but that's about it. So welcome everybody. Hope you're having a pretty good day so far. It's been a kind of crazy day for me. I don't have my dogs with me right now. They're at the beach with my mom. They're having a good old vacation, but it's raining like crazy out here. That's why I keep looking over to the side. It's super, super stormy today here, but hopefully it doesn't cause any issues with the internet. Although I am getting a signal that my Wi-Fi, if you're on Wi-Fi, try plugging into your router, but I'm direct in already, so it's just the internet's issues. But yeah, we'll do the typical, do the hellos and all that. But I think before I do that, I don't usually do this, but I thought I might start doing this, is just put something up on screen, kind of showing a bit about what we'll be looking at today. So I'll do a simplified version of the tree so it's large enough that it's understandable. Basically, it's just the ancestral stuff. So in a sense, this is just my great-grandmother's pedigree tree, but not in a pedigree way. Yeah, okay. No smart copies disabled. What is, all right. Okay, it's showing right. For some reason, it was giving me some weird message. Okay. I'll have to look at that later. I don't even know if that was showing up for everybody. It might have had something to do with Genie. But this is the tree we'll be looking at today. This is my great-grandmother. This is my great-grandfather. And my great-grandmother was born in the town of Tulchyn in Vinnytsia Oblast, which I guess you can't really see me super well, so I'll make myself bigger. But like right here is Vinnytsia. I think that's right. I think I have it right. I think that's Vinnytsia. And then Tulchyn, I can't remember where it is. It'd be like here-ish, I think, right there-ish. So that's what we'll be kind of focusing on today. But let's go back to, there we go. So we'll be looking at that, and I'll talk more about it in a bit, but we'll do the hellos. I'm going to do them kind of quickly today, so I'll just kind of click through. So, hello, everybody, all of my regulars, all the new folks coming in from all over the place and from far away, Sefcat. But we've got representation from all over the place. Even if you're not able to stick around and participate in the stream, like our Faroe Island representation there, Weeping Scorpion. Thanks everyone for jumping in, and Hudnavend. Hope all is well with everybody. And all right, Shabbat Shalom from Chernivtsi, Ukraine. So we have someone who hopefully will be able to help as we go through some of the records, because I'm planning to go through some unindexed metric. Well, I guess they aren't metric books, but various records. Very cool. Very cool. So we've got a pretty good crowd going on already. So I kind of just want to jump into it. I do want to, can I make this any bigger? Yeah, I can. There we go. That's much nicer. All right. Much nicer. I just have to remember that I have that little green bar at the bottom too. All right. So with this family tree, I've first started out, when I first started researching, I only knew my great-grandmother's parents. And then slowly I was able to figure out my great-great-grandfather, the Shmara. And then over the past 5 years, I want to say, I think it was 5 years, maybe it's been longer. That's when I've made the biggest discoveries in this family. The first major discovery was a cousin of mine had been going through family information and found that our shared second great grandmother's maiden name was Reimer. So Reimer, Reamer, it's kind of the way that the Cyrillic is spelled, it would be Reimer. But in a lot of things it's spelled Reamer, so that's why I have it there, Remer, whatever. But that was kind of the first, oh wow, that's something new on that side of the family. Then a few years after that, I hired a genealogist who lives in Vinnytsia Oblast. I think he actually lives in Vinnytsia, the city itself. Sergey Fazulyanov, someone I've talked about a lot on my channel, because I did a video back when I first after I hired him for this research, and he looked into the records in the town of Tulchyn, and at that time, none of those records were digitized, or at least if any of them were, they weren't available. They were just sitting somewhere on someone's computer or something. So someone had to go into the archive, and so that's what he did for me back then. And that was when I was able to confirm that my second great-grandfather's father was Shmara, because we'd gotten that from the gravestone, but I always was like, I'd never heard of that Hebrew name before. So I was like, is that really his name? Is that really his name? And then, yep, that's definitely his name, Shmara, although sometimes he's like Shmurl. But some of the English records, they just call him Sam. That was the thing. We found him as Sam, too. And then he also found, siblings and other stuff. But he found this second great-grandmother's mind family, the Reimer family. I was able to expand on a lot of that. But anyway, jump forward after a lot of records are digitized and available and easily accessible. I was able to start building out all sorts of stuff that that's kind of what we're going to be expanding upon today, is all of this stuff that I've been able to build. A lot of big discoveries that I've made recently. It's a lot of stuff that we can find, but the main thing that we're going to focus on today is my Waxman, Vaxer family. Excuse me. So this family, like I mentioned, from Tulchyn and Vinnytsia Oblast, and when they were in the U.S., they were known as Waxman. I always knew them as the Waxman family. But then once I hired Sergey and he looked at the records, he was like, well, based on the names you gave me, it doesn't look like they were Waxman. It looks like they were Vaxer, or what would be the equivalent of Waxer. And there were Waxmen in this town. I've since found that there were also people with the last name Vax, V-A-K, well, technically V-A-K-S. Do I have the Cyrillic spelling somewhere? But recently I've been trying to see if I can figure out if all of those families are connected. Basically, are they multiple families in the same town taking these various names? Or is it one family in the same town who took this name and then the descendants slightly changed it? Some went as Vax, some went Vaxman, some stayed Vaxer, or whatever. I wasn't sure. And then on top of that, there's a lot of Vaxers that I haven't been able, or that I don't know how are connected. So above my third great grandfather, is that right? Great, second, third, fourth. My fourth great grandfather, Avram Waxer, who we know he existed, but we really don't know that much about him. We just know he was born about 1800. There are death records in Tulchyn. Actually, here we'll look at this. So for anyone not familiar, this is Jewish Gen, and we're gonna do any field. So, oh, whoops, that's not what I want to do. I want to do starts with. We'll just do VAK, any field, Tulchyn. Now, one thing I wish Jewish Gen had a better search function, better search capabilities. One of the big negatives about it. But when I look at the deaths for Tulchyn, there are some Abrams that could be my family. But there's one, the Vaxler, now born about 1809 based on this. So age 45, date of death. Let's see, can we see the image? There we go. So he'd be right here. So Avram Vax. Is that right? Is that him? Yeah, Avram Vaxer, 45. And then here we can look at for any of our Hebrew readers, we can look at this side, and that's him right there, Avram Vaxer. There we go, Avram Vaxer. So the thing is that 1809, it's like really right on the edge of might not be right. But then again, we also don't know if that's the right age, because that might be him, and he might be older than what they say. Because if he was born 1809, that means he would have been 15 when Shmara was born. Granted, we also don't know Shmara's exact birth date, so that also throws that in. So it's hard to tell if it's him or not, but it certainly could be. And then there's this other Abram Vaxman, son of Elkin, who, if that's true, that brings us way forward. But I honestly don't think it's him, because dies 1854, age 30, and that just does not make any sense. 1824 is when we think Shmara is born. So I think it's probably this Avram Vaxer. So here they say Vaxler. I think that's why it kind of looks weird to me. But the thing is there's not really any Vaxlers in the town, really. There could be a whole nother family named Vaxler, but yeah. Hard to tell. All right. Let's see. I haven't checked chat in a bit. Let's see. Where even was I? All right, Broseph. Oh, we have enabled, disabled. John Tyner, my cousin, Catherine. And then we have more folks coming in from Ukraine. Awesome, awesome. So hopefully me showing some of these documents, you're just like, oh, that's awesome. No, I am not Israeli. Berke, do you know if you have any connections to Karaites or Krimchuks? I don't believe so. But I also don't know for sure. I don't know. Well, if I do, it's not something I know about. All right. Well, let's get back to it. So the thing that I've been doing is taking the records I can find and kind of building a hypothesis tree. I always debate whether or not I should do this in my tree that, like this tree I have is public, so people can go on Ancestry and actually look at the tree. Granted, all the living profiles are private and some other profiles are. So I have these marked, like you'll see tree tags, actively researching, hypothesis, unverified. People sometimes ignore that. But basically what I've gone through and done is I've looked at all of the various records available, and I've created a hypothesis tree based on ages and the names and things like that, and come up with a general possibility of a tree. So basically, Shmara's father, Avram, we assume was born about 1800. So if he was born about 1800, his father would have been born about 1770, assuming, about a 30-year gap, just an average of, being as young as 20 to 40, possibly having children. So about 1770. And then when looking at all of the records available in Tulchyn for people that take the Vaxxer name, there was one record, I think it was this, Yos Vaxxer, I think it was his birth, or there was something I found. Oh, I think it might have been actually a revision list. But basically, it's like Yos Vaxxer, son of Yankel Vaxxer. And Yos was born 1784, which would then make us assume that his father, Yankel, would be the oldest known Vaxxer we could identify that's tied to Tulchyn. Because otherwise, the oldest would be these guys born in the 1780s. But assuming that all of them were possibly brothers, assuming that they're all the same family, because that's kind of the thing, is that's what we're trying to research to figure out. And I'll explain why I do some of this in a second as well. But make a connection hypothesis based on that information, and then we can make an assumption of how old Yankel was. So the oldest would have been Reuven, and so the assumption is Yankel is also Reuven's father, and with Reuven being the oldest, then we do not exactly a 30-year gap, but about, So that just gives us kind of an idea of like, okay, as we look through the records, can we find anything to help us confirm this further? And hopefully I can do some of that, but we'll see. So that's kind of where I was last in researching it. And I don't remember exactly where I had been, because part of the research is also trying to find connections to living people. Because if I can do that, then hopefully someone from that branch of that tree will be able to, or will have done a DNA test, or would be willing to do a DNA test if I ask them to. And then also I have cousins on my family side that are patrilineal descendants of the Waxman family, the Vaxxer family. And so they would be people I'd want to ask to, do a Y-DNA test. And then any others that we can find that would have that same patrilineal descent, could we do that? That line's Y-DNA. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I have not. All right, let me check how things are going. All right, we've got a lot of people in here. All right, good. I see. Question, Wes. My second great grandmother had suspected Jewish ancestry because she had the last name Rosenstein, but I have no Jewish show up on my DNA test. I used 23andMe. Okay. So yeah, the thing is that you need to figure out exactly where you think the fully Jewish ancestor was. So you say second great grandmother had suspected Jewish ancestry. So was that you suspected that she, both her parents were Jewish, or do you suspect that it's something less than that? Because depending on how far back it is, that fully Jewish ancestor that you'd expect, then that's going to change the likelihood of you actually inheriting any of that DNA, because through recombination, DNA gets, recombined out. So let's say that your second great grandmother, you suspect that one of her parents was Jewish. So she's half Jewish, meaning your third great grandparent would be the fully Jewish one. So how much DNA do we expect from a third great grandparent? Well, you get 50% from a parent, 25% from a grandparent, 12.5% from great, 6.2 whatever from second great, and then third great, you're going to be at 3 point whatever. So you would expect a little bit, but you're at that distance. There's also the possibility that you might not inherit any because recombination is random, and those percentages we give would be if the recombination was perfect. And I guess I should mention, for those who don't know, but what I mean by recombination is, when you have children, your DNA recombines, and then the children inherit that. So it's this process called meiosis. I'm not going to get too sciencey with it. But basically, the DNA gets recombined, and so it's just a random assignment of DNA, sort of. But if you expect it's even further back than a parent for your second great grandmother, then you have even less and less and less of a possibility. So the thing to really do with that would be, if you have other cousins who descend from the same second great grandmother, and especially if you have, let's say you have a dozen cousins from various branches who descend from the second great grandmother, look and see at all of their DNA tests, and you might see a common, 1, 2, 3% Jewish for some of them. And while that's not a confirmation, that could be an indication that maybe, yeah, you do actually have, maybe there is Jewish ancestry from that second great grandmother. And let's see, interesting, that makes sense. I'll have to look more into it. The only thing I found out so far is both her and her husband were from Austria. I've been trying to look more into it. Okay, yeah. And the other thing too is, you mentioned, last name Rosenstein, but the thing is, Rosenstein, even though it was commonly adopted by Jewish families, it wasn't only adopted by Jewish families. And so, while it could be indicative that that could be Jewish, it's definitely no confirmation. Granted, it doesn't sound like you think that it's confirming that, but obviously, just something to say in case. Yeah, it could have been very interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to jump right back into this. I don't want to get too sidetracked by questions. So, all right. So, do I have the other thing open? I don't. So one of the things we might go through, I was talking about. Oh, I already have it open. I was talking about Jewish Gen, and we'll definitely go through that. But I always talk about the Ukrainian Wikimedia, where a lot of these records are just available. They're not indexed, so you have to go page by page, and that's where knowing Cyrillic, knowing how to read old Russian writing, is helpful. So the website is in Ukrainian itself, so you need to have a plugin, kind of like what I have. I don't know. Let me see if is that coming up? No, that's not coming up. But you can see I'm clicking that little icon there, and for me, it pops up a little thing that says Ukrainian or English, and it's a Google Translate tab, and so then boom, translate to English. and then it's easy to go through. But there's a lot of stuff on here that has been indexed on Jewish Gen. So like down here, there's where do you show it? Where's Tulchyn? Here we go. Okay. So they have all of this stuff, but a lot of this stuff, like a lot of these birth and death records, they're available. So like these death records, death 1854. Well, death record. Oh, they don't have 1854 in here. Maybe it's in a different spot. So if you look, you'll see a lot of overlap with stuff, but it just basically means you need to kind of go through and, oh, here we go. That's where it's from. So this is that same metric book that this death record we pulled up is from. So you can see that little red outline there. And there you go. That's the book. So with Jewish Gen, Ukrainian SIG, and a lot of the other SIGs, they've been going through a lot of these newly digitized records by various groups and getting them indexed on Jewish Gen, which for anyone who's doing research into Jewish families, if you have researched on Jewish Gen, it's hard to say. I was going to say research the name, but I mean that as in like re-input the name into the search database. You need to research the name, but research the name, if you know what I mean, because you'll look and you'll see the numbers of available records going up. And that's the thing recently over the past year that has allowed me to really expand a lot of this research, because I was doing it a bit, but going through these records, basically what you have to do is you go page by page, you look at this page and you scroll down and you go, can I pick out the Vaxer name or the Reimer name or the Skurich name or, any of the names that I have in this family these families that I'm researching in Tulchyn. And it's not easy because I do not read Cyrillic that well. The Vaxer name stands out a lot to me, partially just because like the capital B and like the AXE, like it looks like it's not always like an X though. It's basically a KC. So here it's kind of weird, but like it's like a BAKCER is what it looks like if you wrote it in English. Like that's what the letters are, because a B in English, an English letter would be like a V sound when written in Cyrillic. So going through this one by one, that is really difficult. But that's what we had to do until they started doing all this work. Yeah, funny how a great-grandparent on my maternal grandfather's side was 90-something when they died in 1960. Very interesting. Okay. Oh, didn't mean to click that. Meant to click this. Rose Daisy Marigold. Both my Jewish grandparents lived in London 1880s to 1910s before emigrating to Canada. Both families were from Russia, which could mean anything. How to start figuring out where they were from? Well, I mean, going to Canada, the immigration records, the manifest records, those might indicate where they came from. I'm trying to think of what records in London might be helpful, because like I guess GRO records might be, but I feel like with GRO records, it's kind of, I don't know if they usually put cities. I feel like with GRO records, I usually see Russia or something like that. You can look at census records sometimes, even though sometimes census records will actually put a more specific place, like sometimes a region, sometimes a city, but not always, because they usually are just aiming for country, but sometimes you can. And then, yeah, I mean, like any immigration records as well. So like if they naturalized in Canada, or I guess if depending on their deal from London, if they were English citizens, I guess they wouldn't have to really naturalize in Canada. So yeah, I honestly haven't done too much Canadian Jewish research, especially in doing Canadian Jewish research to identify the location. Usually when I do Canadian Jewish research, it's a family that I've already identified from the US usually, or sometimes other places, but like I've never had to try to find that location. So interesting. So let's get into this. So the thing that I was doing most recently, looking at all these, is I was kind of focusing kind of on the oldest ones. So I've been going through like these oldest ones. So like there's this guy, Chaim Vaxer, dies 1852, 52 years old, so born about 1800. And so with Chaim, I think, oh yeah, I think I found him elsewhere. So I have him in there. We've got the Vaxmans. Okay, yeah, Moshko David. So here he's born 1799. I don't think I have a David in there. And he's a Vaxer. So this is kind of like what I'm doing. So like, okay, I have a Moshko David, born about 1799. Don't know if he's from Tulchyn necessarily. Let's look at the actual death record, and let's see, 50. Okay, he is a. So, okay, that's him right there. Lost one. So we've got Moshko Davidovich Vaxer. So Moshko Duvagovich. One thing that like I've learned is that whenever you see what looks like burr, like for English speakers, literally, like that looks like someone hand wrote burr. I don't know if that's, hopefully that's large enough to see on the screen. But like that looks like someone hand wrote burr. But that's when you write hand script Cyrillic, it looks, that's what Vich is. So whenever you see Burr, you always know it's Vich. Like little things I've picked up here and there. Like I'm trying to see if there's any other interesting ones here. Like here's an actual beat, like what is that? Brashlovitz? Brashlov? Could be wrong on that. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, I hear from people all the time that they're like, I can't read Cyrillic. I can't read this language. I can't read that. And it can be hard, but I always think the best route is to try to learn how to just identify things phonetically. I don't know if my experience having known how to read multiple scripts as a kid had part of that, because like, you know, I didn't speak Hebrew, but I knew how to read Hebrew. I had to learn it for my bar mitzvah, and you know, I learned it in school, but I kind of taught myself, because as soon as they like gave me the books and stuff, I started reading it, and I like fast forwarded through lessons really quickly. Like they kept pushing me up, and like I had actually started late. They were worried I wasn't going to catch up in time, and I kind of surpassed people. But knowing how to be able to catch that kind of stuff makes such a huge difference. Just very simple, you know, reading it. And I've definitely gotten better over time, but it's helpful. And it starts with those stupid, silly things like Burvich. But yeah, so we have this Moshko David. Now I do have a where did I? Oh yeah, I have this Moshko Reuven. And we have his death in 1849. Is that, did I put it? No, 24 April. Oh, yeah, right here above him. So yeah, so Mashko Reuven died. So that's the other thing too, is it's like, okay, well, we've Mashko and a Mashko. Could Reuven and David be brothers? Because based on ages, it would certainly make sense. So that's kind of what my assumption would be, in a sense, or not an assumption, but that would be my go-to hypothesis. And so that's why I'm going to add it in. But the thing is that I don't know for sure if this is actually correct. We're building this so that as we do further research, we have something to kind of look back at. And then we're going to do child. Oh, wait, I did this wrong. Whoops a daisy. Child, Mashko, male, and then we know he dies 31st of December 1851, and then born about 1799. No, he's in Tulchyn, Vinnytsia Oblast, Ukraine. And there we go. Now we've got more added. And, one of the things about doing this way is you have to constantly keep going back through and through. Because, once we get new stuff added, it's like, okay, well, now we have this new Mashko added. Oh, this, maybe some birth we'd seen earlier for, someone's son of Mashko. Maybe it's like, oh, well, now it makes sense. It could be this Mashko. But the other thing we have to consider is now we have to be very, very careful, because we know for a fact that between 1799 and 1849, there were two Mashko Vaxers living in Tulchyn who were possibly first cousins. That's our assumption. They could have been some other relation as well, for all we know, or no relation at all. One of the difficulties about this research that I'm doing as well is understanding a bit of the context of the history, in that most Jews I think it's the whole Pale of Settlement. I know it's different in different areas of the Pale of Settlement, but basically in 1804, it was decreed that everybody needed to have a surname. All the Jews needed to have a surname. And so that's when you largely find the most Jewish families in the Pale of Settlement adopting their surnames. Well, 1804, what are we looking at right here in comparison to that? And we're looking at the family at that time. So part of that understanding with doing what I'm doing is that these may not be people who are related. All David, Reuven, Shimon, Yosef, or Yos here, which is basically Yosef, but they could all be completely different families, and they had to take surnames, and for whatever reason, they all took Vaxer. I don't know if there was a job or occupation that was related to being a waxer, doing something with wax. Maybe, and maybe they aren't family. Maybe this is maybe all these people were just the wax, makers of Tulchyn, something like that. But that's where the research will lead to, hopefully eventually getting DNA testing done, finding more records, especially as stuff gets more digitized, getting a better, understanding of everything that was happening back then, and a better idea of the town, because Tulchyn was a pretty large town. It's not a small spot. So, not huge, but it's large enough that it's like, okay, this is a pretty big area. And when you kind of zoom out, you see all these roads. leading into Tulchyn. And then the other, one of the other spots, Bratslav, large connection to Bratslav. You can see that that's kind of a large area. And then Vinnytsia up over here somewhere. There we go. Vinnytsia being kind of like the big city in this area. But even then, like looking at the size of this, like, yeah, it's way bigger than Tulchyn, but for that being kind of the big city in the area and then going and looking at Tulchyn, it's like, okay, it's a pretty decent sized town. But I forgot exactly the numbers because I found numbers relating to how many people were living in the town, but it was like thousands. And so with thousands of people living in a town, well, that means that especially if a bunch of people in that town are forced to adopt surnames, there's a possibility people are going to adopt the same surnames as other people they're not related to. And especially if you choose the more simple of the surname you choose, the more common it is. And I mean, think about it in English. Smith, right? The only thing other than that would be the patronymics like Johnson, but then, Jews already are doing patronymics before adopting surnames. All right. I'll have that up. I saw some questions. Julia, does the ones that emigrated, do you record both their original and new names? So yeah, I tried to record both. In Ancestry, I haven't done that as much. Most of my research up until recently, it's going to make me log in one sec. Most of my research until recently has very much been focused on building in Genie. And I still build a lot in Genie, but I research in Ancestry and then transfer what I've researched over into Genie. And so that's something that I've only started to do in the past few years. But one of the things with Ancestry that I really hate, especially compared to Genie, is that it doesn't allow you to have the robust amount of naming fields you really need to be able to see someone's names. So as an example, here's Isaac Vaxer, my second great-grandfather, and look at that, Itzko Vaxer. And then here we have it in Hebrew. We have both, I don't know why they're putting first name first, but Yitzhak and then Vaxman here, because in the US, they used Vaxman. I think I have, it's probably in, I'll show it in a second, the marriage invitation for his daughter, my great-grandmother. But then here, Vaxer. But yeah, so let's see, Pearl Ross. So you can see here in the Hebrew, well, this is actually Yiddish, but Pearl, I guess it's Prelia. I'm terrible with the names, pronouncing it, but yeah, Perla, Pearl, I guess, Vaxman, marrying her, what is that, Haran Hari Rosenberg. And then all the Hebrew. So Vaxman here, not Vaxer. But yeah, definitely them. See, what's your advice when you've done an autosomal DNA test, 0 Jewish, but on the detailed full mitochondrial DNA test, very lots of hints of possibly Jewish, Ashkenazi, and Sephardi ancestors from the Iberian Peninsula? Well, the thing about mitochondrial DNA is that you've got to be very careful with how you interpret things, because with mitochondrial DNA, whatever matches you have, these are going to be people that are matching you thousands of years back. So funny enough, this is the perfect family for me to show this with, I guess it's not exactly the Waxmans, but it's this Tulchyn family, because this is my father's mitochondrial DNA line. So going up here, so this is my father's mitochondrial DNA tracing in Tulchyn, and his closest matches with the new Mito Million project. My assumption is that if we were to actually look at some of these matches family trees, I would expect to find some being in Tulchyn, or at the very least Vinnytsia, especially Bratslav, or before it was Vinnytsia Oblast, it was Bratslav. And like I don't know, maybe I can get into that in a bit. I'm going to log into this account first. But with his matches and the new Mito Million thing, they were able to basically say, like, okay, these matches that you have, we feel like they are related, I think, in the past 300 years. How did I get that wrong? Oh, that's right. That's right. That's not what I have. Okay. Sorry, logging in, people. Logging in. But one thing I will say for those who are kind of watching this and wondering, should I do a mitochondrial DNA test, or should I have someone from a certain side of my family do one to, research further? I think you definitely should. They're not, it's not like it's cheap to do, but, they're not that terribly expensive that, it's not out of the realm of kind of budgeting for it. And I think that, it's something that could be extremely useful for researching. So yeah, okay. So basically the timeline. So here we have the breakdown of the mitochondrial DNA, and we have this timeline, the time tree. And so K1A9B1 is our haplogroup, and that ancestor, they assume, was born about 1619. So we're talking 400 years. And when we look at the tree, well, mine is back to someone we know was born in 1796. We know Crentia. We have her death record in Tulchyn in 1872. Wish I knew what her maiden name was, but none of the records unfortunately show that for her. But basically, 1792, that's only 180 years after the assumed shared ancestor of my dad and all of these matches. And then even further, my dad has this breakdown. He's in here, where basically they're saying, okay, we've got this cluster where there's I don't think that's big enough for people to read, and it's blocked by the, there we go. So when I do that, so a haplotype cluster represents multiple testers with identical mitochondrial signatures. Because signatures can include fast mutating markers and personal mutations, testers within a haplotype cluster are not necessarily closer maternal relatives to each other than other testers within the same haplogroup. But okay, so back to the actual question at hand, though. With that being said, when you look at your matches, you need to analyze how close does it say those matches are where they all have Jewish ancestry. Because when you look at that, you might look and see that, oh, it's far back. Because, like, look here, we have K1A9B, and okay, we still have people that, they're putting themselves in places that are typical for Jewish ancestry. But I know once we get far back enough, there we go, we start getting people where it's kind of all over the place. And we're not too far back. K1A9. That's honestly what I had up until the Million Mito project. And that's 1 BCE. So basically 2,000 years ago. Well, I guess she lived a little bit further. But so, you're looking at thousands of years when you're dealing with this kinds of stuff. Yeah, so with you, see what you can find, especially the time tree is super helpful. I can't show the match time tree, but the match time tree is literally just the time tree. But instead of showing just this basic stuff, it shows you the actual match, and you can look at all that sort of fun stuff. And then I'm not going to be able to find that. Oh yeah, reset. There we go. So, but yeah, I mean, if you have it where you look at it and it shows, okay, you're part of this very specific cluster, and like you see a bunch of people with Jewish, then that means that either your mitochondrial line, your purely maternal line, if you look up that line, you'll find a Jewish ancestor, or the possibility is that if these Jewish matches you have look up their maternal line, they will find an female ancestor that then her descendants became Jewish. So it can go either way. Like with my mitochondrial haplogroup, not my father's, mine is H1AI1, and one of my closest mitochondrial DNA matches, granted, I think it's a genetic distance of 2, still distinct, but is Megan Smoleniak, another well-known genealogist, been around for many, many, many years. And her maternal ancestry is Irish, Scottish, I think, or maybe something like that. It's somewhere in the Irish, Scottish, one of those two. So yeah, good little aside, I guess. And Julia, maybe Candlemaker. Guessing you're talking about this is back to the waxer thing. And I'm noticing now that I'm glitching out a bit. Why is it doing that all of a sudden? There we go. Much better. Okay. Yeah, that's one thing I was thinking, because it's like that was a big thing with wax back then. But I also don't know how popular like whale oil would have been at that time in that area. But I would think that it would have been decently common too. But yeah, anything that might deal with wax. Yeah, the only possible hint since the MyHeritage updates are little amounts of Portuguese, especially Netherlands. Okay, so the other question is, are you talking about... Okay, but on the detailed full mitochondrial DNA test, so you're talking about the family tree full mitochondrial DNA test? Because if you're talking about the MyHeritage haplogroup, which actually does MyHeritage give you a haplogroup now? I don't think they do. It wouldn't be them, but yeah, if it's just the haplogroup you're getting from one of the sites, then yeah, that's don't take that as, oh yeah, that could be Jewish, because those haplogroups, those are the ones that are like, oh, our closest matching could be 2,500 years, 3,000 years, whatever. Yeah, and yeah, thank you very much, BT. Don't forget to like the stream. On MyHeritage autosomal. Okay, I'm a little bit confused. I think because you said here on the autosomal DNA test 0 Jewish. Does MyHeritage give you haplogroups now? I don't know. All right, let's get back to this. Kind of even this up a bit. I know I'm not going to look at those too much. All right. So we've got Moshko in there. So now going through, yeah, Moshko, Reuven, Kelman, Rumen. And then here, Shmari. So this is one of my great-great-grandfather's brothers. So my great-great-grandfather, Isaac Waxman, a.k.a. Itzko Vaxker. His brother, Shloma Vaxer, another son of Shmari. Died at just... Now, this is interesting. This, if I went by what Jewish Gen had here, I would get it wrong. And it actually threw me off when I got this, because I was like, what are they talking about? Because he's supposed to be like, I think it's 3 years old here. And then when you look at the image, it's like, oh, what the hell were they thinking? So basically, where is it? Thought it was... Here we go. I hate that. I find it, I zoom in, and then it takes me right back to the top of the page. So Shlomo Shmarovich Vaxer, and look, where are we? Shlomo, 5 out of 12 age. That would make you think 5 months, right? 5 months, 5 out of 12. Oh, wrong thing. 5 out of 12. Well, that Shmar Vaxer right here, 3 years and 5 months. 3 years and 5 months. But for some reason, they were just like, yeah, 5 months. 5 months, that's it. No, 3 years and 5 months. So had I gone by what Jewish Gen had, I would have thought it was the wrong person, and that's what I did. That's one other good reason why it's good to be able to phonetically find this stuff, is because then you can do exactly that and go in and look at it and see, oh wait, that's not 5 out of 12 months. That's 3 years and 5 out of 12 months. But for whatever reason, when this was being indexed, my guess is somebody input it in a way where they just didn't enter the 3. And then it came out just as the 5 months old. So, yeah. Oh wow! I just saw this $9.99 super sticker or super chat. I think I need to learn the names of these things. But anyway, thank you very much, Brosif. Hi, Jared. I got my Y111 results back. My closest match has ancestors from Berdyshev, Ukraine. Our shared paternal line ancestor was likely born in 1750. Confused about EY6940 migration. Thanks. Well, interesting. So Y111, I don't. Interesting. So I'm curious where you're getting that born about 1750 year from. Because with Y111, I thought you had to do the big Y to be able to have it that sort of granular and how close you are. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong, because especially like that time tree I was just showing for the mitochondrial DNA, they show that same thing for big Y. But I thought that was only big Y, and that's really where you'd be able to tell that. Beyond that, like with Y111, if you have a match of 0 genetic distance, then I think it's a pretty strong match, but I don't know if it's within 250 or not. But that's not your question, really. Confused about EY6940 migration. EY6940. And we'll look. Oh, I've actually I Googled this before, apparently. Okay, so EY6940. So we can see EY6940, 600 CE. So within the past 1400 years, we've got a lot of people who've tested that come from that. And then it looks like, yeah, big Y testers from your haplogroup typically discover a more recent genetic ancestor in this time. So that's where, yeah, the big Y would come in. So, the time tree, that's where you'd be able to tell. So I don't know if maybe one of these is you. Maybe, did you mean big Y? I can't imagine you meant big Y. Because Y111 is very specific. But it's possible. But yeah, so if you did big Y, then hopefully you'd fall within one of these. But presumably, I guess, the other thing I guess I'm thinking is, maybe did you come to that conclusion of 250 years based on your match at a 0 genetic distance, having done big Y, and they said something along the lines of, 250 years. But if that's the case, that wouldn't necessarily be it. Okay. My Jewish ancestors were from Germany, France. Does that mean they migrated to the Pale from there during 1750? No, I did upgrade to big Y, but haven't received the results yet. Okay, so you'll get that idea. Not sure where the 1750 is really coming from, because with that Y111 match, Let me see if I can pull up DNA test distance charts. Okay. So here we have the tip tool. So Y111 genetic distance. Oh, I guess they do show that. Interesting. Interesting. Most recent common ancestor time predictor based on YSTR genetic distance. Is that right? Interesting. Okay. See, like with the zeros, I expected a much larger range. Okay, I believe it said 3 steps with the median year is 1750. Oh, okay. So your top match is a Y111 with a genetic distance of 3. So when it says Y111, that's 111 STR markers tested. And out of those 111, only 3 of them were different between you two. So it gives an average year of 1750, but the range is 1600 to 1900. So the shared ancestor could have been born as far back as about 1600, or could have been born as recently as about 1900. You don't know for sure. Thank you, John. It's called a super chat. But yeah, so you don't really know for sure how far back it is going to be necessarily. And the other thing too is that these amounts aren't always going to be correct. They're just kind of generalizations. They're based on the data that they have. And so a big part of that will also have to do with, if you come from a family line where, maybe your paternal line, you had a lot of generations of big age gaps. So typical age gap, 25, 30 years or so, but what if you had it where, your father was 40 when you were born, and then his father was 40 when he was born, and then his father 40 and his father 40, and so on. And then you go back 10 generations, and then all of a sudden that's a lot further back than it would be if it was a bunch of 25s and 30s and stuff like that. Even if it was just 20 or 30 year gap versus a 40-year gap average for 10 generations, that's 100 years difference. So even with these ranges they give, it's not like it's definitely within that. It's just, okay, based on the data, this seems the most likely scenario. So like when you look at like these sorts of charts and stuff, it gets really, really small back there. Granted, that's what is that, Y12. But yeah, okay, so Y111, you can look and see how that kind of, okay, we've got the 3 right there. So 0, 1, 2, 3. And so that line goes all the way down here. And you can even see that technically, even before the 1500s. So, you never know for sure. The most likely scenario is that it's probably around about 1750, but doesn't guarantee it. Once you get your big Y, that's where you're really going to get a way better idea. You'll get a much better idea. But then that'll also depend on what other top matches you might have. But yeah, in terms of the migration side of things, though, like, if your Jewish ancestors were from Germany and France, how far back did you say you knew your ancestry? let's see. My closest match, your closest match. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing is you're probably looking at a couple hundred years of difference, and that's a lot of generations. And my guess is that with the whole migration bit about his ancestors being from Berdichev and yours coming from Germany or France, if you look into it, I'm sure you can find something. And especially, if your ancestors, let's say, if they were in that area in the 1600s during the Khmelnytsky uprising, is it? Never spell it right, never know. But during this time, a ton of Jews in the mid 1600s were escaping all over Europe. And you can see, kind of how, I mean, I guess you're talking, you said France, Germany. So, basically, maybe you both have ancestors that this is where they came from, was, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And then your ancestors happened to escape to Germany, France, and his ancestors happened to go to Berdichev. Yeah. So that's kind of, there's a lot of possibilities. My fifth great grandfather was born in 1742, likely in Hesse, Germany. So there you go. So, if you don't have your ancestry traced back to the 1600s, maybe, your family came over to where you have them in Germany and know where they are. That's the thing about genealogy, is it's amazing how quickly, as you go back each generation, that you have all these left turns. Because it's like, you could have it where there's multiple generations of like, okay, well, I always thought my grandfather was this, but then I found out that he was actually this. And then I found out who his father was, and it seemed like his father was this, too. But then all of a sudden I found out he was this other thing. And like, if for anyone who watches Finding Your Roots, a great example of that, even in like recent history, is Fred Armisen, where Fred Armisen's grandfather, he always knew him as this Japanese guy. He was Japanese. And then when they did the research, they found out that actually he was this Korean guy who had gone to Japan. And then he had to kind of basically pass as Japanese because of all the issues between Korea and Japan at that time. And then, like, went on to do all these different things. And then, his family, everyone, as far as they knew, he was Japanese. But that, it's completely different, unexpected, thought they were Japanese and then turned out to be Korean. And so you just never know when that's going to happen in your own family. So especially when you're looking at a possibility of differences of hundreds of years, which you would be expecting with a match that's a Y111 at genetic distance at 3. Brian, have a great stream, guys. Head into mine. Talk next week. All right, have a fun stream. Yeah, for those who don't know, Brian runs his own stream on his channel, How We Got Here Genealogy. Does a lot of Scottish, Canadian sort of genealogy. Other stuff too, I think. He been on a couple of videos of mine too. So, but yeah, I'm probably gonna actually be finishing up here soon anyway. So after I'm done, everyone should head on over to his channel. Yeah, Broseph, my earliest records on that site are from Moselle, France as well. Very interesting. Okay, cool. Yeah, as you get further and further with the DNA research and all that, who knows what you might find. Burke, Black Sea Germans immigrated to Ukraine as early as 1760s. Hesse was one of the regions where these Germans came from. Interesting. So there you go. That's the other thing too, is those interesting pockets of population migrations. And it happens all the time. So yeah. And then Jose been bragging about his family. I always have to be careful with your comments, Jose, because like sometimes I'm like, is he asking a question? And it's just like you're just talking about your family. So not anything bad, but it's just, yeah, it's cool. All right. So yeah, actually, with that, I think I will end it. I guess I didn't do a ton of building necessarily, but I feel like the main thing was kind of just talking about how to do doing the research and stuff. And I did some. You got to see kind of what some of the process is. But yeah, I think that's going to be it. I've been going for over an hour. So yeah, hopefully all of you enjoyed this stream. Why is it not going back? There we go. Hopefully you all enjoyed this stream. Not sure what I'll be doing next week on the stream. We'll figure it all out. But hopefully you all enjoyed. I don't know why I'm blanking right now as I'm going out, but yeah, I don't know. That's about it. You all have a wonderful rest of your day and wonderful rest of your weekend. I'll see you all next week. Bye.